Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. I'm Tudor Dixon, and I'm so glad you are tuning in today because I have a friend of mine on, and I'm just thrilled to have him. He's great. He's interesting. He's got a fantastic background, and he's done a lot of great stuff. I'm joined by Bruce LeVell. He's a businessman, a long-term political advisor to President Trump, and a contributor at the Washington Times. Bruce, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Tudor. And yeah, hey, I got your buzz line. The Tudor Dixon Show. How's that?
I'm going to need you to record that so we can play it before.
No credit, don't sweat it.
Thank you. Well, Bruce, I want to say you and I met years ago when you were first working on, you started this in 2015, this political world, breaking in with Trump and his campaign. And you came in with a place, I think a place of more knowledge than most people, having watched it, having been a small business owner. But what made you say, I'm going to go all in and be by his side?
Oh, gosh, there's so many. I actually talked about this on CNBC because they were like, oh, this black guy in the South, what's going on? Yeah. Well, I just hit 29 years last month, my wife and I, and our jewelry company, and we're in real estate too. So we built shopping centers and a bunch of stuff like that. But just real quick to your answer, there's 30.6 million small business owners in the country, the U.S. We're a force to be reckoned with because we are a compilation of 62+% of the GDP. So we essentially control the money. The interesting dynamics of this is where I'm going with this is that, and to answer your question is why I got involved. I'll just summarize it real quick. The unfortunate part of our leadership, Congress, Senate, in some parts of our state house, state Senate, and our local elections have been controlled by special interests. And the American public are just going to work, working hard. And what they see when the flyer hits the mail, they don't really know what's going on unless they really dive deep like what we do. And so what happened was, during the financial crash in 2010, it was catastrophic, especially in Atlanta. The subprime and derivatives, your job is your credit, stated income, 400 credit scores were getting mortgages. It was a catastrophe. But what it did is it hurt the business community and the commercial community of good standing, good creditor people. So what happened was a lot of loans were called and a lot of things went, especially in Vegas and a lot of places. People had no business getting mortgages and loans with bad credit. Well, that's another subject. So this is where I'm going. So long story short, we had a loan that was called in quick. It was called in because a bank failed, not because of my bad stewardship, because of others. And so essentially the FDIC seized the banks. And back in 2009, every Friday at 4:00, you go to Bank Implode and you get to see which bank was being taken over by the FDIC. A lot of small community banks got pushed out. Medium-sized banks got pushed out. And so what happened was they called one of my loans, one of my buildings that I built. I'm like, what do you mean you call it my loan? Well, we don't own the loan anymore. It was sold to, quote, SunTrust. I'll use the name. And so anyway, 30 days later, after they seized my bank, they called me up and says, we no longer want to be in a relationship. We're calling your loan. Pay us in full, which is millions of dollars in 30 days, or we're going to sue you on the note. I'm like, wait a minute. What are you talking about? I'm solvent. I have 25% equity and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so I started complaining to some of the local congressional people and Senate people. And then I start chasing, and all I got was, Tudor, and to your audience, well, I'm sorry, the economy's bad. I'm like, wait a minute. So one of my friends said, listen, go look at their campaign coffers and look deep into who is funding their campaigns. And so I started digging, and I saw all of these bank lobbyists, Tudor. I was like,
oh my goodness, that is really very smart.
Yeah, real talk. So the majority, watch this, the majority were in cahoots with the bank lobbyists. And so they didn't want anything favorable to a debitor, but they found a license to steal, which was part of the TARP money. And for all the viewers, you remember the TARP. It was the taxpayers' money that was used to bail out banks. Now, the unfortunate part of it is they use it as a one-size-fit-all. So the good solvent, good people were pushed in the same boat as the bad people. Unfortunately, when I say bad business people who made bad business decisions, unfortunately.
Right.
So I realized, like, my God, you guys are on the hook. You're on the take. Fast forwarding, why did you support Donald Trump? The key message, and all the viewers, listen carefully. This is what we're dealing with right now in the re-election, as I call it, in 2024 for President Trump. I am not going to be beholden to special interest and pay to play. Now, the average person is like, okay, that's a sound bite for a campaign, stomp speech, whatever. But listen carefully. He backed it up, and he still backs it up. And so what's happening is now here we go again. We got more candidates into the field who are backed by special interest. And I'll call them out. I'll say Ron DeSantis. I'll say Will Hurd, who just announced today he's going to be in the same boat, and many others. But this is where I'm going with this. So when you're free, yes, free, your own business, your own deal, you're free to come out on the Tudor Dixon podcast and speak freely, not worrying about is the person I work with or work under is going to put some duress or punish me for coming out being vocal. And that's, quote, the great freedom of being self-employed and self-made. That gives me that freedom to do that.
I think that what you're saying to me is so interesting because I just watched something with Joe Biden when he was first elected senator, and they were asking him questions about should we limit the amount of money that one individual can give to a campaign account. And he said his argument was, yes, people can become very corrupt very easily because they always owe someone something. Once you've accepted the money there, you've accepted, you can, and he went into great detail saying you can compromise in your mind. Well, okay, I might not agree with this, but I can do good things with this. So I'll take the money and we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Now think about that. That was when he was 30 years old. We're talking about a man who is in his 80s. What, he's 80 years old now? Yeah. This entire time, how many people is he beholden to after all of that time of accepting money and not, he didn't come into office wealthy, but he's leaving. Well, he's not leaving office just yet, but he will be. But he will leave a very rich man if he lives through this term. So what does that say about our political system and the way it's set up?
You know, it's interesting. I remember one thing that I liked about John McCain. If you remember, Tudor, John McCain was one of the very, shall I say, was very catalyst and very vocal on, quote, real campaign reform. And especially with this subject right here. And of course, it would get a little life and then all of a sudden it would die. Because unfortunately, both sides of the aisle for generations, we have some on the Senate side, on the Democrat side, right now as we speak. I'm going to be nice and not call names because I know who they are, as well as on the Democrat side. I'll just say, because it's just so many. So what's happening is they've been there so long that they can't govern because, to your point and to what he said when he was 30 years old, yes, that's true. You can't govern properly because you owe too many favors. And that's what you're seeing across these gubernatorial races, these Senate races, these congressional races in districts. And I'm pleading with, because I do a lot of press and I love talking about this because for all the viewers, listen carefully whether it's a city council seat, a commission seat of your district, especially this, Tudor, probate, state court, superior court, attorney general, district attorney, please pay very close attention who's funding these people. That will tell you where the power structure lies.
It's almost like that should be out there. It's almost as though that should be, and that we've been talking about this a lot in the past few weeks about why is it that they can get all of this secret money? I mean, Gretchen Whitmer flew on a private plane to go visit her father and then said it was a campaign expense. It runs rampant. And then these people, you owe them a favor. They give you a plane. You've got 3 families owning one plane. You owe them all a favor. All of a sudden, you've got these special interest groups that come into the state. They're only working for one candidate. So if the Republicans have no one and they have 10, how is this an okay way to run an election? Because look at Randy Weingarten, another example of this, where this is somebody who pulls in a ton of money from government employees. All of these people are state employees. So she takes in all of their money and then she uses it to get government people elected. Doesn't that blow your mind to think about how this works?
Yeah. And it gets back to we the people. It's kind of like people get upset about AOC and Tlaib and Omar. And I say, guys, it's constituents. It's the people in her district that voting her in. So
let me argue one thing. I think it is sometimes hard to see who is behind some of these people because of these outside organizations that get them elected, and it's all private. It's all non-disclosed. You don't know how they're getting. So it's bizarre to me. You've got Rashida Tlaib, who is absolutely opposite of all of the Muslim values. And the Muslim community is coming out and supporting her in mass. Now, suddenly they're going, we don't actually agree with all of these policies that she has. It's these outside groups that are brainwashing people, essentially. Legally, but they are.
Yeah. Well, we're dealing with this in Georgia. They passed a law where Brian Kemp was able to push it over the finish line last year, where essentially I use the term, you can park dark money, which he has about 60 million sitting in a coffer that you don't know who gave it to him, and he doesn't have to disclose it, to your point. So, I think respectfully, in order to save our great republic, I think, this is a situation where it's an all hands on deck. And if people are very serious about the country, as John McCain said, what's it worth to you? What's it going to be worth for our children's children if you keep allowing this until you just look around and then everything is owned and you own nothing? So I think it's going to take.
I think we've been so spoiled that nobody believes that can happen. Everybody in the United States is very entitled. And I think they see people and they say, well, look, he was able to achieve the American dream. It's still on the table. But big government has created more and more laws and regulations and really stoppages along the way to make it so that you can't have the American dream. And I think that the people who are voting for these politicians are not understanding that the policies they are enacting are taking away your rights in ways that you don't see. Because if you can't open a new business, if you can't get through the environmental tests, if you can't get through the cost to license your company in a certain area of the state, who is hurting you? You have to figure out why the American dream is on the slowdown.
Yeah. And, it's interesting when you talk about, regulations, et cetera. I'll give you an example. When I was appointed by the president in his tenure, I had the whole entire southeast of the United States on small business, and I reported to the White House. And it was his regulatory reform that you saw. He cut over billions of dollars in January 2017. As soon as he got elected, he kept his promise. Real quick, I have a friend of mine has opened up a smoothie nutrition, smoothie drink shop. And it's, 1,800 square foot inline space in a retail shopping center. Started 5.5 months ago and still going through the permitting process.
Yes, this is what I
going with this. Exactly.
This is what I want. But and if we're going to be completely honest here, it is hurting our minority communities more than any other community.
Absolutely. I was in Birmingham this past Saturday I'm on this tour with Bernie Marcus's group, Contract to Black America. This is my philanthropy stuff I do on the side. Not out getting rich on it or anything like that. It's, we go out and we have conversations and, 90% predominantly Black communities. And we talk about this subject here on the regulation side, the access to capital side, how in 2010, Dodd-Frank was a license to decimate all the small banking institutions off the face of the map. So there can be more, quote, government regulated control over lending. And we can get into that conversation, but watch this, and to your point, when, and one of the main goals that we're talking about generational wealth and resurrecting wealth structure through generational wealth through Black culture, like my wealth, my dad's wealth, his granddad's wealth is part of that antidote for sustainability in the event of a pandemic, the fake China virus pandemic, as well as the, financial crash in 2010. So when something catastrophic happens, your generational wealth, there's more sustainability and you're not, quote, reliant on the government's umbilical cord, which essentially, and I wrote about this too, it's called, as Black America caught up in a voting generational curse. It's another piece I wrote in the Washington Times. For all the viewers, go, Google that and check it out. It's kind of cool about that generational voting curse.
Yeah, that's definitely I mean, and I think that's even what we're seeing in these other, well, like I said, in the Muslim community in Michigan,
Yeah.
that has been generational, and they say, well, we had a time where we knew Republicans didn't care about us, but it was very interesting to see how that worked, because in their faith is very conservative. So
Yep.
all of this woke stuff, they are not okay with. And you can see it was sort of this moment where a lot of these men were saying, I don't know if I want to go the direction of Gretchen Whitmer, because
Yeah.
she is pushing this stuff, and she continues to. If you look at her posts every day on Facebook or on Twitter, every day the comment is, if you are LGBTQ, come to Michigan. If you want expanded women's health care, which is really, I mean, we know what all of this means,
Right.
and that does not include their community at all. I mean, it doesn't include many communities. She's putting out their communities that are not highly representative of the state of Michigan. And where does that leave the people who say, well, why doesn't my family count?
It reminds me of a story. I remember when we were going to go to Flint, Michigan. This is early 15. I used to do a lot of CNN hits. I used to be frequent on Don Lemon's show. That was the C Block. I did that all the time. And I remember...
Oh, I guess you'll never do that again.
I mean, I don't care. I'll do it. Quite frankly,
I mean, Don doesn't have a show now.
Whoever's show. But anyway,
right.
We were going to go to Flint, right? You remember the whole, water situation that was going on, Tudor, the poison water situation. Yeah. So, we were like, coalition's like, hey, let's go up there. We'll go with the president, candidate Trump at the time. And I remember I was on CNN that night. The mayor came on of Flint and said, we don't want him in our town. He's racist, blah, blah. So what we were thinking, and I don't know if you've ever been in the Middle East and parts of Saudi and parts of other cultures in there, that they have an extremely highly sophisticated water treatment center. They can pump that seawater in Dubai, and it tastes just as good as spring water. No lie.
Wow.
So we're saying, okay, well, maybe we can pull all some resources together, come up with a solution, how to get a good water treatment plant over in Flint, just being proactive. And we got persecuted. And this is where I'm going with this. And all the viewers, watch this, especially in predominantly Black community, Black churches. This is how where we're going with this conversation as relates to what the Muslim community is starting to see, is because generally huge, quote, liberal corporations send money to that pastor's foundation, not directly to the church, his or her foundation, mega money in that church, especially if there are over 1,000 members. Okay. So he can use that as his personal coffer, really, on justifying it, flying here to this speech, live strong on the foundation. So the minute the pastor stands on the congregation and wants to, let's just say the women's sports situation that's another conversation, and stand up there and be like, no, that's not fair. That contributor that is the benefactor, which is probably supporting 80-90% of that debt service, who has the control? It's the same thing in what we talked earlier in this conversation about elected officials. It happens with civic leaders, especially Black civic leaders. Watch this real quick. Sharpton and Jessingham are quiet as a church mouse. You would think that being, quote, Christian pastors would come out and say, wait a minute, guys, a man who says he's a woman or a little boy says he's a girl gets to run in a track meet and get first place over the little Black girl. Watch this. I worked in ministry for years. I serve in inner cities for years. It's the life support, Tudor, volleyball, softball, basketball for a lot of young Black girls. So they're competing with little boys in some of these city schools. Right? So where I'm going with this is that you see I'm saying they're quiet as a church, and they're not the only ones. There's another mega pastor church in Detroit, same situation, quiet. Because why? They're smart enough to know where to go get the control, and that's unfortunate because pastors historically in Black communities were the president of the community. Historically, all the way back to the 1800s in the U.S., as well as to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they were the person, the noble person of all the community. The pastor says this, so they're very charismatic and impressionable. Reverend Wright, and whoever that can articulate a message and say, well, the pastor said. And then if he doesn't want to address that, he won't talk about it because he or she does not want to interrupt the money stream. So they know that. That's what's going on. That's how they were able to run the ads in Black culture on the jab. That was very rampant that was going on because they had access, Big Pharma contributing to their 501(c)(3) foundations outside of the official church.
Right.
That made them like very wealthy and controlled. Anyway.
Let me ask you something about the schools, because you talked about the girls and boys sports. Now, it seems like from our perspective running through the state of Michigan, there were these, we call them the woke messaging, but it was different depending on the area that you were in. If you were in a low-income minority area, they were not pushing the LGBTQ message. They weren't pushing the message of boys and girls sports. It doesn't seem to resonate in those communities. It seemed like that was more of a CRT. You know, you're being held back. You're never going to achieve. You can't get the opportunity that the other folks are getting. In the wealthy white communities is where we would see the real trans push in those schools. Why do you think that there's a difference? Why do you think the public schools are choosing to target with this woke messaging, but it's different depending on the area?
Because the money and resources. There's no money, unfortunately, in the predominantly lower income communities. So once you deal with the top, it's a dominoing effect. So then all of a sudden, it's just like the school board when they vote on things and PTSA meetings, if you don't have a 90+% parent participation, and everyone hear me on this because I'm a dad, my kids are grown now. And I'm an advocate of always going to the PTA meetings and PTSA meetings, be 100% attendance. Mom and dad especially be there. If you can't be there, one of y'all get there, because the stronger and robust that is, obviously the more control. And to this point, most of the inner cities have zero participation in the PTSA meetings or PTA meetings, Tudor. That's the elephant in the room. So
it seems like they're constantly being told that people are racist.
Yeah.
You live in a racist world, and that keeps them in this shell, but it also keeps those communities voting for them. And then the other communities, they're saying there are these Christian white people that want to stop you from being who you can be. I mean, is it that message of LGBTQ just doesn't resonate in those communities, but they have control over them if they throw out that word racist, which they love to use for everything?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, once they break down the wealth and get that control, it just dominoes down. Then the wealth controls the school district and the county. So it's just like, well, that's what's going on. So they don't have to go in there and make that sale to a lower income. All they go where the money infrastructure is and control that. Then it just dominoes down. That's why they do that. And so it's sad, it's unfortunate, because it's a reality. And that's why you're seeing such a huge cultural war at the school board meetings. But in light of this, real quick, I'm very optimistic because in January, we did swear in some really good, solid America First school board members this year in January. Remember, this movement is still kind of growing. We got a few America First Congress people now. We all know who they are. Byron's a good friend of mine down in Naples, because I have another home in St. Pete that I'm a Floridian too, as well as a Georgian. And there's other good America First. Burgess is doing a good job in Utah. We're slowly rising up and trying to. You were going to be America First governor in Michigan. I mean, I don't mean that as some kind of Trump cult following and all this kind of whatever people trying to put it. No, America First means, can we just put America first, since we are in these United States, and then after that, everything else falls with it.
And I think that what's interesting to me, I was talking to a group of guys, it's young business owners, and I was talking to them about America First. And I said, you have to understand, having owned a steel foundry and watching steel foundries across the country close, we had American companies who would even if they had a 90% Buy America clause, they were buying 10% from China. And as those castings were made and we were continually making parts in China, we stopped making enough parts in the United States to stay open. So you were losing all these jobs, but all of this knowledge. You don't open a steel foundry overnight. And I said to them, you have to understand eventually it becomes that knowledge is gone. And even if you are not in the United States, you have no allies that are making these either. So we're not even thinking about it from the standpoint of, well, at least keep it in allied countries. We are now beholden to China to even finish our military vehicles. And they went, oh, I didn't really get that that's what America First meant. I thought it was just we would only buy from Americans. No, America First is just protecting what we have, protecting our national security, making sure that our purchases are in line with keeping America going.
Yeah. You know, the name of my company is DunwoodyDiamondsUSA.com. And people say, why do you put USA? Because my factory is in Dorville, which is 5 minutes from my main showrooms. We manufacture and we cast, I heard the term cast, what you just said earlier, we cast platinum and gold, centrifugally and vertical spin, et cetera, et cetera. We assemble, we set, et cetera. So we're self-sustainable and we manufacture here. Mike Lindell is flown down, saw my operation. We talk about it. And of course, he tries to promote his things being made in America. But I think respectfully, getting back earlier in this segment, we talked about the quote, taxation and regulations. And so when you're overly taxed and overly burdened with regulations, those that watch this is true. The first cities and counties that fall have the highest tax burden. The cities that have the best sustainability, counties, cities, and municipalities, who have the lowest tax base can weather the financial downturns or the China virus pandemic. Those are the ones that can sustain. And that's true. Y'all fact check me on this. Is economics, my wheelhouse. Because when the lower the sales tax, like I think Michigan, what are y'all, 9% up there? 9?
6%.
Okay, 6. That's good. Here in DeKalb County, we're 8%. The neighboring county, 7%. But yet DeKalb County's government is twice the size as the government next door, but it has fewer population than Gwinnett County, which is 7%. And the Cherokee County, which is 6%. So
that's what happens in Detroit. There's all these county and these city taxes that they pile on. That's why it's almost impossible if you are an inner city Detroit resident that is not outrageously wealthy to start your own business because you could never get past the startup cost.
I think I looked at that in 18. I think they were at 47% based on the debt service when I did a P&L analysis on.
And we wonder why these cities are not thriving. We wonder why these cities cannot come back on their own. If you can't build your own business there, how could you build up the city?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in Birmingham having this roundtable with the 99% Black audience as well as probably 90% Democrat audience, is the fact that when I said this, I said, if you're pushing back low millage rates, low sales tax, run it real skinny. Skinny. Obviously, two things: infrastructure, which is roads, lights, and of course, police, public safety. That's it. All the other extra programs puts an unnecessary debt service on the taxpayers. And then these politicians come in and says, we're going to create jobs. No, ma'am, no, sir. The only way you create jobs, I'm the one that does that. When you minimize my tax base, as well as as you saw the Trump tax cuts in 2017, you notice the FICA, and all the viewers, when you get your check, it has FICA. When you hear government, screaming in DC, Senate and Congress yelling about that, that's what they're yelling about, that FICA, just for FYI. So that lower that number, the more money is back into your wallet, which is discretionary income. You have more money to go get, to an eatery that you generally wouldn't go, and you can push the economy faster because there's more discretionary money. Employers, as your family, myself, can incentivize our employees because there's more money to give them instead of giving it to the government. This is getting back to that curse again, that generational curse. Right. Government is the save all, fix all. It is a deep rooted spirit, Tudor, and it has to have an exorcism. I'm just going to put it to you like that in order to extract that thought process, especially in a lot of the predominantly brown communities. I hate to say it that way.
Well, and that goes back to just the beginning of all of this, where you said, find out what lobbyists they are working with, find out what money they're getting, because all of those extra taxes are coming from somebody who said, well, we can do this and we can do that. And if you look, if you peel back the layers of the onion, you will find things about people that you have supported or people, even those that you didn't support, that you should share with your friends. You can be that person that is exposing what's actually going on. And we're talking about this in Michigan right now. You can't even FOIA the legislature or the governor here. There is secrecy all around. All of the deals, the tax deals that go to these big businesses, they're all under non-disclosure agreements. So, it is truly shocking. And I honestly, I'd love to have you back to talk more about this stuff, because I think that you have a unique perspective. I hear that you're coming to Detroit. I'd love to see if there's anything that I can do while you're there, but I'd love to talk again and have you just explain how some of these things are going and how we reach some of these communities, not only minority communities, but suburban moms. We don't seem to be reaching them. And I think we're expecting on the conservative side for these folks to come to us. We need to learn to go to them and talk to them about what we can do. So hopefully you can teach us. We'd love to have you back. Bruce LeVell, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Tudor. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I love having you. I love having conversations with you. You're so much fun, and you're just a great father, a great businessman. So thank you so much.
Got a great wife.
Yeah. Well, we're all trying, right? Hopefully.
Got a great wife.
Oh,
31
that's
years.
so sweet.
31 years.
Yep. That is so sweet. And strong families are what it's all about. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining me on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com. You can subscribe right there, or check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you join us the next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have an awesome day.